This is a question that's been itching at the back of my head ever since I made those videos about the fate of the major conventions should Donald John Trump become the 47th president of the United States and basically blow the lid off the mainstream media cover ups, regardless if the con allows Vic Mignogna in or not. But he's back burner material. We're now going to focus on the cons that I believe have the best chance of surviving a great woke purge and nothing else. So, what conventions do I believe will survive this? Survive this outcome. We'll start with the smallest conventions I can think of. One day regional seasonal comic conventions. Why do I believe these will survive? Well, for the most part, most of the celebrities they do bring in are legendary comic book illustrators and authors, number one. And number two, they don't have the budget to bring in a big name voice actor, whether it be someone like a Mignana, a Sabat, a JYB, a Rial, a Marchi, etc. I've been to plenty of these over the last 3 years. 3 or 4 years. So I know what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty sure every state across the country has at least one of these that go on in certain parts across the country over the year. Hey, Evie. In my opinion, the only major convention that's going to survive, as far as I'm concerned, or excluding Matsuri, I just want to stress this. And I want to stress excluding Matsuri, for example, would be Heroes Convention, which is a massive convention in my area that happens on Father's Day weekend. Now, why do I say this con will survive it? Simple. They have one unbreakable rule: no voice actors allowed. Even the overkill whiners who want a voice actor in wouldn't get one in no matter how hard they tried to. This is a con strictly for comic book where the guests are strictly comic book writers or artists and illustrators. No more and no less. Granted, it's also kind of ironic that one of their more frequent guests moonlights as a pro wrestler on the Canadian independent circuit. Most would know said individual by his real name of Andy Belanger, but I know him by his ring name of Animal Bob Anger. You wouldn't know of him unless you've watched any of the Canadian indie promotions, things like C4, NEW, or his home promotion, the IWS. That's up in Quebec. Next up are certain pop culture niche cons. These usually last anywhere from 2 to 3 days. 2 day examples: Repticons. Now, what the hell is a Repticon, you may ask? It's basically a 2 day event where they display a bunch of exotic reptiles for the awe and wonder, and maybe the edge of the adults, and maybe some level of educational value for the kids. I wish I was making this up with this kind of convention. Next up, the horror conventions. Things like Fear Fest, the Mad Monster Expo, Mad Monster parties that are spread throughout the country. Now, while you will get on my case by being a bit hypocritical that this does allow voice actors into it, I will like to make a counter I would like to make a counterpoint to that argument. Many of the those that switch to voice acting or do voice acting on the side that show up at horror conventions, people like Matt Ryan, Matthew Lillard, Robert England, Michael Rosenbaum, John E. Glover, just to name just for some examples, they predominantly got their starts in live action content, whether it be in horror or sci-fi. In other words, these individuals are live action actors first and voice actors second. So they get a pass from my in my book. Which is ironic when you consider all five of the men I just mentioned have had their hands tied by the Warner Company, especially in anime content. Michael Rosenbaum, the Justice League Unlimited, Justice League incarnation of the Flash, John C. Glover, the Riddler from the Batman anime from BTOS, Robert England, Felix Faust in JL Justice League and JLU, as well as the Scarecrow in Injustice 2, Matthew Lillard, Shaggy from Scooby Doo, and so forth. Yeah, I know about the Galacticons, but I'm not counting those, Evie, as those do permit voice actors. They don't count. The anime VAs. And to lesser extents, yes, I can also throw James Marster, who is going to show up at this year's Mad Monster Expo at the end of August, as he does technically have one anime role under his belt. Zamasu in Dragon Ball Super. But to get back on topic, then you have the major wrestling conventions: WrestleCon, The Gathering, and WrestleCade. Two of them occur in my area: The Gathering in Charlotte at the start of August, and WrestleCon in Winston-Salem near me on Black Friday weekend. Self explanatory, these are wrestling conventions. You're not going to see a lot of people from the voice acting industry. And even if you do see someone from the voiceover industry at those wrestling conventions, they're not coming as official guest book for the show. More than likely, they came in because they had to buy a ticket. And they came in by purchasing a ticket. And to be honest, it wouldn't have surprised me if individuals like Sabbath or Kyle Bear, for example, did that for the 2022 for WrestleCon back in 2022. I mean, I know at least Kyle Bear is a massive wrestling fan. Not so sure about Sabbath, but the point still applies. But basically, and yes, there are VTuber conventions that have no voice actors. Thank you for that, Evie. But the point is, even if Sony and Crunchyroll get taken down, and even if the bulk of the voice actors who were involved in sex trafficking, drug trafficking, adultery, and blackmailing cover ups get arrested and are put in the slammer for anywhere from a 2-year community service sentence at worst and to 20 and a 20 year to life sentence in prison at best. There will still be conventions people will be able to go to. But it also boils down for the major cons on their operators. Are they willing to repent for being complicit in the crimes of said company, or are they going to go down with the ship? Though, to be honest, if one were to ask me, one other element many of these major conventions need to get rid of, the drag shows. Now, I'm not against certain portions of the LGBT community, but I am against men dressed in drag entertaining little kids. It is disturbing in my view. But there you have it. My 2 cents on what cons would survive a great woke purge in 2025. And by woke purge, I mean eliminating the element of wokeness from popular culture. Leave a comment, smash the like, and sub to my channel. This is Mets2128 signing out. This was more of a political tirade than it was an entertainment based one. I don't like doing these political videos, but when something like this itches at the back of my head, I gotta let it out. So goodbye, good night, bang, and we'll find out what goes down between now, the next 126 to 202.